a challenge in the personal development space is avoiding what needs to be resolved and trying to just move on to the next in order to produce the result in which you believe that you are intended for. You can't be so tied to the path that you think that you're in control. Right? In the calling, you must surrender the path. And in the surrendering of the path will the actual healing take place that is required in order for you to actualize into who you're meant to be, beyond, which is beyond most people's current awareness, because the
Welcome to the podcast. We're here at the greatest poker room I've ever been in. It's brand new, and in fact, it launches today. The Venetian Resort, Las Vegas. You have to come and join us because we're going to be doing a lot of content out of the poker room. We have a beautiful studio this winter. We'll be launching here. We have an event center. You can come play poker. There's going to be a variety of different games. And I brought all my friends to play today. And one of my best friends, newer friends, is Bucky O'Neill. Bucky is a transformational friend. He's a transformational leader and coach. But Bucky, you carry a different energy. And I'm a clear sentient, so I feel it would make me a horrible doctor. I can't even go visit my mom in the hospital because I'm afraid of the way I'm going to feel. It makes me a fast crier. Yep. It makes me an easy read for other people. But when I first met you, before you said a word, I'm like, I got to go meet that guy. And Nick was with me, and he's like, why? I'm like, because he has this energy. And from the time I talked to you, even in difficult business situations, coaching, there's just this soothing feeling when I'm around you. And it's just instantly, it's like, well, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm seeing. You're open to talk to me about this and vice versa. And you listen. We flew back from New York City, and he traded seats to sit a middle seat to be next to me. And I looked up, and I'm a time freak. Yeah. So I look up, I'm like, dude, he goes, what? I go, I need you to go back to your seat. He's like, what do you mean? I go, dude, it's 4 hours and 15 minutes of my 5-hour flight. You know what shit I was planning on doing? I'm like, oh my God. Is that intentional? Like, have you worked on being able to be that soothing, like, vibe that you give?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, that wasn't really my outcome, the soothing piece. I think in the beginning I was just working on myself, and I was committed to, how do I become the best version of myself? And I knew early on that in order to be the best version of myself, I had to align to something that was greater than myself. So I think it just became a byproduct of that. I think there was a time where I was really conscious, went through the personal development space of looking at journaling and affirmation and, what are my daily practices and how am I crafting my life to be to a point where I'm just clear. And one of the things that I design my life for and work my life for is just to be connected and have the divine expressed through me. And I know that my human self needs to be the clearest and cleanest vessel that it can be, and that's part of my practice. And I think the result of that is kind of different for everybody. Some people, it's interesting that you describe me as soothing because a lot of people wouldn't.
Really?
Right?
One's married to me.
Sometimes it comes off. Sometimes it comes off as like abrupt, and I can be especially with clients and coaching and things like that, and in certain types of communication, it's very direct. It can be very powerful. Obviously, with the firewalks and everything that we're doing from a workshop perspective. But I guess there is this undertone that is just consistent, which is associated to my my devotion and my connection to the divine.
I want to ask you about this idea of like clarity. You said that you have clarity and in that version of yourself. And I want to know what that means to you, because I think that could mean something different to everybody when they think about how can I achieve that. But what does it mean to you specifically?
Yeah, clear is about removing myself from the context of my life and understanding that there is a greater vision for myself outside of my own human experience. And the clearer that I can get is the more connected to that the resource that is outside of me that I can be. So that's what I mean by clear.
I love that.
I love that, yeah.
Well, the theme today clearly is expression, right? It's been a common theme. Even whether it was from the healthcare standpoint or even just, even from gambling, expression
Right.
of, right, like where we are, where we are at that moment, the state and the flow. We experience the world, the entire world, both internally and externally through our nervous system, which I think is fascinating, right? And I love that you have this commitment to, being a clear vessel. For Lacey and I's world, from a chiropractic perspective, I love that word clear, because what it means for us is a nervous system free of interference, allowing us to be an expression of, the innate intelligence within our bodies. But I know that you even look at that, and I'm saying this, not a lay person, anything less, but not a doctor of chiropractic.
Yeah, of
I would
course.
love to understand your layperson interpretation of clear. What does that mean to you? How do you clear yourself?
Same thing. I think there's, you don't have to go to school to understand how your system works, right? I think that, part of what happens in the clarity is that you get connected to resource, and in resources information. And within that information is a Rolodex of everything that ever was, everything that ever is, and everything that ever has been. And when you're accessing that type of information, you can have insight into knowledge that you haven't experienced within your human experience. And there's terminologies and understandings of the body and how it functions, and of the world and how it functions, and of the identity of self, and the outside of identity of self and how that functions, that just become common known knowledge in that space. The clear space is about, how do I remove myself? How do I remove my identity to the point where I can be so connected, but then simultaneously understanding that the resource of that connection wants to flow through my identity. Right. So it's like this clearing so that you can be in a greater expression as a human self, but not from the human self.
So it's really interesting because I use words like recollect, remember, remind.
Yep.
And I haven't really thought about until you were explaining things about resource.
Resource.
And then in the context of resourcing,
Yes.
and what a resource is, and utilizing it as an expression. In fact, genius to me is the expression of God or the divine. And so the clearer the framework or the delivery mechanism, which is the embodiment of soul, then the clearer the expression, which has a greater impact, a greater frequency, a greater vibration, whatever you believe in. One of the things that we share is that we're able to take our understanding of that and put it into a very pragmatic, quantitative framework in which to effectuate other successful things, whether it be business, relationships, politics, other things that have more of a human construct to them. But when I see how you, and I try to do the same, and it's like I utilize this higher framework of resource in order to effectuate resource into something that could be very slow in its vibration and very quantitative in its nature.
Yeah.
And how would you describe that of what you do? Because the clients that we share, and we all share clients, which can create conflict too, right? When you're sharing, because we don't know what all the moving parts are doing. But I have a trust in that we all work within this guise the same way. And the results of what I hear is, holy shit, Shawn saved my life, or Lacey saved my life, or Shawn made me millions of dollars, or Lacey made me millions of dollars. You weren't as obvious as the two, right? To me, like, my concern was handing off, as I was coaching you and Leah, like, okay, I'm going to hand off this billionaire to this guy, and what if he's like super just woo-woo, and like, you just walk across fire and your business is going to get better. But you actually have greater systems and processes than most coaches I know.
Yeah, because for me, they're both connected. Right. So your divinity within the worldly space has to do with your physical structure of the ways in which you work, whether that's your physical body, your business, your relationships, your emotional body, your psychological well-being. So what we're always looking to do is, how do we build structure and systems in a way that's going to provoke the divine expression? And there's specific, we work with specific people. Right. So the people that we're working with are people who are achieving at a really high level, but are looking for this piece called self-actualization of like, I want to be, it's like the thing that you always say, like, I'm committed to be what I'm meant to be. and then it's in the context of the structure of their business or the structure of their life. So we're looking at those things and we're saying, hey, how do we bring the best version of you into this? Or how do we build this in a way that's going to demand the best version of you to come forward? So you mentioned the firewalking thing, and the biggest thing that we do with our highest level clients is about building energetic capacity. Like how do I in physical form have the energetic capacity to be able to hold the energy that's coming through me so I can direct it and focus it into the areas that are important to me. And a lot of people, when they start to hit these levels of success, what happens is that energy gets leaky and they start to disperse it in unconscious ways, which in a lot of ways could be looked at as self-sabotaging, could be looked at as, hey, I'm unconsciously acting, or I'm trying to resolve something in a way that's indirect. And what it is that we're teaching them to do is just to close up all the holes so that that energy can be focused and they can ascend that really powerfully. So structure is really important for that with energy. When you talk about the metaphor that we often give is we talk about cables, right? Like when you have different gauges of cables, what you find is that the insulation is thicker, and that's what holds and contains the energy. Structure in your life, structure in your business, structure in your relationship, frameworks is what acts as that insulation so that more energy can move through.
And like the vertebrae or your skeleton, like in your field, right, is analogous to what he's talking about.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I keep thinking about this idea of energetic capacity and structure, because you can still have energy in the body that may not be beneficial to the system, right? And so even if we created structure to hold a larger capacity of energy, how do you help people ensure that that energy that is within that structure is beneficial to them as a whole?
Yeah, the body is a little bit different than, let's say, our relationships or whether or our business or whatever it is, because there's this perception outside of the physical body of what's good and what's not good. Right. So this thing happened in my life, that's not good for my business. Or this thing happened in my life, this energy got expressed in my relationship, that's not good for my relationship. And for me, depending on where you're resourcing energy from, like obviously the quality of your energy is a big part of this conversation, but that energy doesn't lie and that energy is congruent. Like when you're actually connected to source energy, that energy will resolve what it needs to resolve in your life, in your business, so on and so forth, so that you can actually remove yourself from the hindrance of what that energy is looking to express through your divine self.
Source is far greater than our mishaps, right? Than our failures, than our
Or
bad
divine
decisions.
detours.
Or our conscious expression.
Divine detours,
Or a projection of what it is
Or
that we
educated
believe. Yeah, we believe that we're
Right.
supposed to be somewhere that it's like the $100 million story. Right? Like you reflect back on that, it's like the best thing that could have fucking happened to me. Right. But in that moment, you're like, fuck you, I hate this. This is the worst thing that ever could happen to me.
Punishment.
Right.
Yeah,
But that's energy flowing through you.
Yeah.
And the rustle for most people is like, this shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened. Why is this happening? Until there's a surrendering to like, oh, this is.
Yeah. Shawn, I want to hear from you. I got to ask this question. One of the things I hate about awareness is it's so difficult on self because we are still human. And so there's circumstances that arise in life with awareness, and you get to a point where it's minutes and moments and you're kind of above the game, but you're still playing the game, and you still may work through emotions and feelings, and it takes you less time. But there's this, for me, an inherent conflict of awareness is the more aware I get, the more that I see I'm human. The more I see I'm human, the more I feel like a hypocrite when I have awareness. And I just use time to soothe me and people like you to soothe me, to be around, and you guys, because I'm just like, fuck it. I literally just have to shorten the amount of time to get back to where I want to be or better and keep progressing and not have that negative feeling of like, why is there separation between my human and the divine?
Yeah. So is that a question? Sure. Yeah.
Or a commentary.
Yeah.
That you can comment
Interpretation?
on.
Yeah.
You can pass it on to Shawn. I don't care.
Yeah, part of the thing that comes up for me, and this is just my experience, is that anytime that I feel myself in conflict is because there's something that's unresolved within me.
Yeah.
And that everything in my life is a reflection of what's unresolved within me. And anytime I have an emotional spike about something, it's an area for me to look. And it's not about me getting down on myself about, oh, this is the human side of me, but more getting curious about what needs to be resolved and how this thing is showing up in order for me to resolve so I can show up in a more clean and clear space. Right. But the thing that's a challenge in the personal development space is avoiding what needs to be resolved. and trying to just move on to the next in order to produce the result in which you believe that you are intended for, right? It's different to like have a calling on your heart and say, hey, this is the work that I'm here for. But in that calling, like you can't be so tied to the path that you think that you're in control.
Right.
Yep.
Right. In the calling, you must surrender the path. And in the surrendering of the path will the actual healing take place that is required in order for you to actualize into who you're meant to be beyond, which is beyond most people's current awareness because the expression hasn't been expressed yet.
And that's where I came up with Ferocious Buddha.
Yeah.
Because there's that conflict. Shawn, you are definitely thinking of something.
Sean's
No, I
gonna
mean,
hit it.
Just smile before you say it. Smile before you say it.
This is what Sean does.
I
Sean
know.
like sits
Quiet,
there and then he drops
quiet,
one. Like, I
quiet.
know
Just
it's
smile.
coming.
There you go.
Story of my life. I'm like, oh God, he's in silence for too long.
It's good. It's good. It's good.
You know what? You know what I think it is? It's because he's married to you, and he decides that if I sit there with that straight face and don't say a word, then she'll use Braille to figure me out.
There you go.
Very smart,
Dreams.
Shawn.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
I get it.
I actually like that. I think the silence. One of the things that on the philosophical side of what it is that we do, is that connection, right? So.
Yeah.
Whether it's in the physical body, but I think there's also this understanding, and I sit in this space a lot, which is whatever you think. If I say the universe is infinite, do you have a conceptualization of that? And whatever it is that you think, that's not that. So when I say connecting you to source, and if I said, well, can you conceptualize that? When I say connecting you to source, but whatever you think it is, it's not that. It's greater than that.
Sure.
Has to be.
So then
Yeah,
you
it has to
expand
be.
your thought, and you're like, oh, good point. So it's greater than what I was thinking three
Which is
seconds ago.
but that's what appreciation is.
But even then, we never can arrive at it, right? We can never arrive. Like it truly is infinite. And I think that's the concept of infinity is much like in the scientific world. One of the areas I sit in a lot is this concept of entropy in science, which says that all things are moving towards a state of disorder, right? We're going towards a state of randomness. But I would argue that there's nothing random about it. That what actually it's moving to is a state that eclipses our ability to comprehend. So one of the things, for me, observation is the ability to just look at the greatness, the magnitude of all of these things. And one of the things I think is really a big challenge in your space is our necessity, within a need to be right or a need to be offended. We also have a need to define everything. We have a need
Yes.
to judge it. This was right, this
Because
was
of
wrong.
the fear
in
of the
moment.
infinite.
Well, I'm sorry?
Because of the fear of the infinite, we need to define it.
Or maybe even just because we don't, a lot of people don't
Misunderstanding.
understand.
Yeah,
right?
misunderstanding.
Comprehension
Yeah.
beyond your
If
belief.
I can suck
Right.
it down into this little world, I can begin to add meaning to it. And I think that's really important for human beings, is that we want to add meaning to everything,
Right.
whether it's they offended me or they like me or I was appreciated or I was not appreciated. We love this idea of meaning. We love the concept of judging that was good or that was bad.
Right.
And I think one of the things is there may be good and bad, but it goes well beyond our ability to comprehend it.
Sure.
And definitely at the moment, like your example was great. Like when something very tragic happens to us, it's easy for us to judge it and define it because we want it to mean something. And so we define it as negative. And then later on, we find out wow, that was such a blessing, or that was actually not a negative. And I think that's one of the greatest things in self-development is our ability to step outside of that. And really understand that whatever the heck is happening is way greater than my ability to comprehend it. And so I think, even for me, I sit in the space oftentimes that I just don't understand. And I think I don't know
Always.
is a great answer.
But what about the fact that I changed mine? I'd loved your opinions of it. So where I understand good and bad for me is that I want to figure out how I can make it good by aligning it where I want to be or better. And so I lose everything, and initial fear and the reaction to fear says this sucks. And my ego has a whole bunch of things that are unresolved. My mom, my wife, my identity, those are unresolved at that time. So I'm punished. This sucks. And then I immediately go into okay, so how can I learn from this to put it in alignment with where I think I want to be or better? And it feels good once I'm able or capable of giving what I don't understand or know, alignment at least with where I think I want to be or better. And for me, that's a human resolve that then
Yeah.
gives me ease.
Because
Sure.
it starts with, I think I want to be, right? So
Right.
for me, my take on that is I couldn't even know, and it's difficult, but like in a philosophical conversation, I couldn't even know where I think I want to be. And if I could surrender to that, then wherever it is that we collectively are going, far eclipses way better than what you think you want. So I'm grateful that you say or better, because if it was just simply,
That's the infinite.
Yeah.
if it just simply was wherever we're going, it's just greater than what we could even imagine. Right. And as long as we are open to that, we get to experience that. And so every single day like opens itself up to like, hey,
Even more.
look at how cool this is.
Right.
And then you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm stepping into that, which is far greater than 10 years ago, like literally 10 years ago. Hey, do you want to be a part of the Venetian Resort Las Vegas? They're going to open a poker room. Maybe you would be there. Like I wouldn't have even thought that. So I couldn't have said 10 years ago where I think I want to be, because this wasn't even on the catalog
How cool is
of
that?
possibility. So I just had to be open to the better part, right?
What comes up for you?
Yeah, I think the thing on philosophy is interesting. I think our need to use our mind in a way to understand the world is a misplacement of the tool. I don't think we could ever understand the examples that you were giving from a mental framework. I think they can be observed. And I think they can be felt through the body. I think part of the work that you guys are doing as far as like aligning the spine and getting to a place of clear is so that you can actually utilize the instrument to receive God and to receive the divine through that instrument. But that's not a comprehended thing. That is an experiential thing. If I think about, understanding, infinity, there was this example that I had where I lived in Bali for 5 years, and part of what I know it's a joke, right? I lived in Bali for 5 years, but
He's still resolving it.
but one of the things that I never understood abundance. I've always thought that abundance was more than enough, right? And then I had this experience, like abundance. If I needed 5, abundance would be 10. If I needed 20, abundance would be 25, right? And I had this experience, and I'm underneath this waterfall at this water temple, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like in this prayer mode, and I'm sitting underneath this waterfall, and I have this realization after 20 minutes that this water's never going to end.
Right.
And that wasn't something that was mental. That was something that was experiential and energetic. And I just got it in my system, not like, in my head. And I think a lot of the work that we're talking about in this way is about that experiential space. Now, don't get me wrong. I think here's the thing to mention too, is that we run a company that does $2.5 million a year. We have a 90% margin. We are coaching people all over the world. We are very clear about how we show up in the world. We have I have adopted 2 kids. I have a second marriage. Like, we're very clear about our investments and how we're showing up in business. And we're also very clear that there's so much more for us to do in the world, and the season that we've been in and the season that we're at calls for specific actions, and that we're not in control of that. Right. And what our job is to do is to align ourselves to what the natural season of our life is, and then have the ability to be able to show up in the structure of this worldly realm and these worldly things, business, relationships, kids, families, finances, and be able to deliver our most spiritual self in those contexts in a way that pulls out the very best versions of us. And to what end? It's irrelevant. To what impact? It's irrelevant to me, because I will never have the conceptual capacity to actually be able to hold it. And that's not the fucking point, right? Yeah. That's not the point. The point is not to know. It's not to be aware of. It's just to show up and to be an in servitude of that source. Right. And the things that you talked about earlier was like resource, like I'm resourcing, but the idea is that I'm an expression of source. And that source is expressing through Bucky, through David, through Shawn and Lacey. Like, that source is an expression through our physical beings. And that, for me, that's the heaven on earth piece.
Love it.
All right, we fell into the airplane problem again.
Yeah.
This guy has to get to the spa. And we got 5 more people to interview. You want to close it out, or I forget who started it, me?
You started this.
You just fell into the Bucky zone. This is the podcast at the Venetian Resort Las Vegas. This is probably the widest spectrum of energy and topics that we've ever had in one session, but I'm blessed to be part of it, and I'm blessed to be part of all 3 of you. And I am graced by your presence here with me and the love that you always share with me. So thank you, all three of you. This is David Meltzer with the podcast.